I don't have feedback on I haven't done no card for this one yet. Yeah, the speech wings made this one, right?
Yep, I'm gonna go hang out here. Yeah, but
Hey, boss, I think I forgot to submit my note. Okay.
you have labeled their comments.
Nobody has a ladder, do they? It's turned on. I can climb up on that table. I don't know. Even if I'm on the table, I'm not trying to reach.
Where's it? Where you trying to get to the plug-in?
I'm trying to get to the power, but it's not working. Amazing.
Trying to roll around.
Is that on the side right there? Oh, yeah, that is it. All right, did it turn on? Does it look like it?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. All right. Okay. That created noise, yes. Wonder, oh, I do have some batteries. No, that was it. Module 5 minutes. I just got to start getting one. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, solving trinomials. A is greater than 1, level 3. 3x squared minus 11x plus 6. When you're solving trinomial, oh, actually, let me put. Actually, still factoring, yeah. Let me change this. Okay, factoring trinomials, 3x squared minus 11x plus 6. Trinomial is going to factor into 2 parentheses. The first thing in both those parentheses is going to multiply to be the first thing in that trinomial. So you're looking for 2 things that multiply to be 3x squared. X and x is how we're going to get x squared. And the nice thing about 3 is it's prime. So only 3 and 1 is the only way you can make 3. So 3x and 1x, good to go. You guys might remember if it's plus and plus up there, you can go ahead and put pluses in the parentheses. But since it's not, we're going to go ahead and skip the signs there in the parentheses. The last two things, those have to multiply to be 6. So that could be a few different things. On the side, I'll list, could be 1 and 6, could be 2 and 3. And you start with 1, then 2, and once you're around on the other side, so 3 here, then you know you've got a whole list, not a big list for 6. But you might remember I recommended the numbers that are closer. That's just a percentage shot. You know, you got a higher percentage of times where they'll give you a trinomial that factors using the closer factors. But if that doesn't work, then 1 and 6 maybe. So I'm going to put in 2 and 3 kind of tentatively. And we'll check these underneath. We're going to multiply the 2 and the 1. Multiply the 3 and the 3. And we're hoping that we can get this middle here, this negative 11. With 2 and 9, you can get a negative 11. Both of those symbols, though, have to be negative, which tells us up here our signs are going to be negative. So negative 2 and negative 9 adds to negative 11. And just going to go back over here on the right side. The 2 and the 3, I'm going to put in the minuses just to make this point. We went with negative 2 and negative 3. Those still multiply to positive 6 and then add. They just need to multiply to positive 6 still, because that's what they were meant to multiply. The last two things, negative 2, negative 3, do still multiply to positive 6. And make sure when you enter that in, you're not putting in 1x, you're just putting in x. Mm-hmm. (6x squared plus 17x plus 10). Going to factor into 2 parentheses. First thing in both those parentheses has to multiply to be 6x squared. So we know we're going to have x and x. On the right, because on the last one, we had a 3, so it had to be 3 and 1, but with 6, it could be a few different things. So on the side, I'm going to put the things that multiply to be 6 again. So it could be 1 and 6, could be 2 and 3. That's the whole list. I'm going to go ahead and put in 2 and 3. We don't know for sure that it's that, but like I said, the closer ones, you'll have a higher percentage with. What's something else in the parentheses that we know for sure? Both positive, right? Because we've got plus up here and plus up here. Go ahead and put in the pluses. And on the end, those two have to multiply to be positive 10. So on the side, I'm going to write the things that make 10, starting with 1. 1 times 10, 2 times 5. 3 doesn't go into 10. 4 doesn't go into 10. And then we're back up to 5 on the right side. So this is everything. I would recommend going with the 2 and the 5. And we'll see if this works. And by the way, I put the 2 in the first parentheses, the 5 in the second. We could have done that differently. Put the 5 in the first parentheses, the 2 in the second. So if this doesn't work, we'll just swap those 2 and see if it works then. So on the inside, when we look at the 2 times 3, that multiplies to be 6. On the outside, that multiplies to be 10. So what number are we hoping that adds to? 17. This middle one, But 6 and 10, no matter what you do with the signs, we can't get 17 from that. So that didn't work. I'm going to go ahead, still keeping with 2 and 5, but I'm going to put the 5 first. And then the 2 second. Okay, so in the middle, now we've got 15 on the outside. So multiplying the 2 inside ones, now we're multiplying the outside ones. So 15 and 4, hoping to get these middle ones, but 15 and 4, that adds to 19 if you add them, 11 if you subtract, but we can't get 17 from that. So it turns out the 2 and the 5 did not work, at least with the 2 and the 3 over here. The 2 and 5 didn't work. So instead, I'm going to erase the 2 and the 5, and we'll try 1 and 10 and see if we can get that to work. So doing the 1 and 10 now. So on the inside, when we multiply the 1 and the 3, that gives us 3. What do we have on the outside? 20. Yeah, multiplying the 2 and the 10. 20. So we can make 17 this time, but need to be careful though, because this one's, it looks like it works, but it's a little deceptive. If you were trying to get 17, the 3 would have to be negative, right? 20 and negative 3 gives you positive 17. The only problem with that is that would mean that these 2 middle ones would need to somehow multiply to be negative 3. But since it's positive 1, we know, and positive 3, positive and positive multiplies to be positive. So this looks like it works, but it doesn't really. So what I'm going to do instead is swap the 10 and the 1 again. On the inside, we get 30. On the outside, we get 2. So again, can't make 17 out of that. So 1 and 10 didn't work. The first way we swapped it, it didn't work the second way. So neither of these 2 options works with the 2 and the 3. We tried everything with the 2 and the 3. It didn't work. So now going to take out the 2 and the 3 and instead put in 1 and 6. And we'll try these pairs on the right again. So 2 and 5. If this doesn't work, we'll swap the 2 and the 5 and then see. So in the middle, we get 12. On the outside, we get 5. And those ones we get 17 if they're both positive, which they are. Positive 2, positive 5 gives us positive 12 and positive 5 below. This one, it's a little tedious to get to the answer. It takes a few, trial and error steps. Most of them won't be like that. The reason this one had to go through so many is because 6 has a few different options. Most of them you'll have a prime number like 5 or 3. So you'll know it'd be 1 and 3. It has to be. But with this one, with 6, it could be a few different things. With 10, it could be a few different things. Most of the time, you'll have a prime one, though. Okay, next section in the module, solved by trinomial factor a equals 1. X squared plus 10x plus 29 equals 8. Okay, I don't know how well you guys can see that, but on the right, I wrote solve. So I want to highlight that part. On these ones, you're going to set it equal to 0. This is with the trinomial ones. Set equal to 0. So if we were doing that, what we want right now, it's equal to 8. We want to make it equal to 0. So if you want to make it equal to 0, you have to subtract 8. 8 minus 8 makes that right side 0. And if you subtract 8 on the right, also have to do that on the left. I'm going to put that underneath the 29 because those are like terms. So we've got x squared plus 10x. 29 minus 8 is 21. Okay, and then after that, you're going to factor. The factoring on these trinomials, for the most part, won't be all that bad. Remember, your trinomials are going to factor into 2 parentheses equal to 0. What's first in both these parentheses? Yeah, it has to multiply to be x squared, so we know it's going to be x and x. We've got plus and plus up here. And by the way, just to go back here, it does say a is equal to 1. So a is just whatever number is in front of x squared. When it's 1, you're just looking for, to complete those parentheses. We're looking for 2 things now that multiply to be 21 and then also add to be 10. You might be able to do this part in your head. What's 2 things that multiply to be 21, add to 10? 7 times 3. On the last one, just to go back just a second, the reason we couldn't do 2 things that multiply to be 10 and add to 17 is because a was not equal to 1. Here, a is equal to 6. If this had just been 1 out front, we would have said 2 things that multiply to be 10, add to 17. There wouldn't have been anything, but here are 2 things that multiply to be 21, add to 10. Then you've got x plus 7 times x plus 3 equals 0. You just say x plus 7 equals 0 or x plus 3 equals 0. And then hopefully your algebra skills are pretty good. Subtract 7, that'll give us x. On the right, subtract 3. Okay, so we end up with 2 different answers on that one. X equals -7, x equals -3. So again, just to recap, solving, you want to set it equal to 0. And then factor. And then what will happen is you'll have a parentheses times another parentheses equal to 0. If I usually explain this concept, but if you're multiplying 2 things, like you got 1 parentheses times another parentheses, if you multiply them and they give you 0, one of those parentheses has got to be 0. You can't multiply 2 things and get 0 without one of them being 0. So one of those parentheses is 0. So that's where we get the x plus 7 equals 0 or the x plus 3. One of these parentheses has got to be equal to 0. So the first parentheses, second parentheses, and then solve. X squared minus 20x plus 38 equals -9x plus 8. So it does say solve in the instructions again. So set equal to 0, which means, generally what that's going to mean is move everything to the x squared side. So the -9x that's on the right, we want to move it over. So that zeroes out on the right. If we want to get rid of the 8, what do we have to do? Subtract 8. And then just make sure you do that on both sides. So we're subtracting 8. I'll put that underneath the 38. We're also adding 9x. I'll put that underneath the x. Bring down the equals. On the right now, we've just got 0. Okay, so x squared, negative 20 and 9 is negative 11. 30 minus 8 is, or 38 minus 8 is 30. Next, we're going to factor. So 2 parentheses equal to 0. X at the start of both of those parentheses. And just a reminder, the a is equal to 1 here. So the number in front of x squared is 1, which means we're just looking for 2 things that multiply to be 30 and add to negative 11. Negative 5, negative 6. Yep, negative 5 times negative 6 gives you positive 30. Negative 5, negative 6 adds to negative 11. And I'll just give you a preview of the answer. The answers are going to be positive 5 and positive 6. Positive 5 and positive 6. It wouldn't matter to me if you guys just went from that step to the final answer, because it's gonna be the opposite every single time. But you know, like I said before, if you're multiplying a parentheses times another parentheses and they give you 0, one of those parentheses has to be 0. So you'd say, sort of the in between, x minus 5 equals 0, or x minus 6 equals 0, add 5. X equals 5, add 6. X equals 6. But all this stuff here, you can skip that just as long as you recognize this is going to be the opposite of negative 5, which is positive 5, the opposite of negative 6, which is 6. We could go back to the last one. We had x plus 7, so the answer ended up being negative 7. We had x plus 3, the answer ended up being the opposite of 3, negative 3. Okay. Okay, 3 more examples. Solve by trinomial factor. This time a is greater than 1. Solve by trinomial factor. A is greater than 1. 5x squared minus 7x equals negative 6x plus 4. So asking to solve, so we're going to set it equal to 0. So everything on the right that doesn't have the x squared, we're going to set that equal to 0. So negative 6x, if we add 6x, that turns that into 0. And on the 4, subtract 4. So make sure you do that on both sides. Add 6x on the left, subtract 4 on the left, and we're left with 5x squared. Negative 7x plus 6x is negative 1x. And then the negative 4 doesn't have anything to go with, so it's still negative 4. So factoring the trinomial into 2 parentheses, We know we're going to have x and x. What numbers are going to go in front of x? 5 and 1. Nice thing about that, not a whole lot of options. They've got to multiply to be 5, so 5 and 1 has to be it. On the end, though, the last two things have to multiply to be -4. So that could be a few things. It could be 1 and 4, or it could be 2 and 2. Generally, you'll want to start with 2 and 2. After you've done a few of these, though, you know, when you can, if you imagine putting the numbers in 2 and 2, you know, on the outside you'll have 10, and the other one you'll have 2. So 10 and 2 doesn't give you the -1 that we want in the middle. So just to kind of, you might have to go through a little more trial and error than this, but maybe you've done enough that you start to sort of intuitively pick up on how the numbers will need to be. But in the middle, you'll have 4 times 1. On the outside, 5 times 1. You can get -1. We're trying to get this middle one. You can get -1. What do those signs underneath need to be then? +4 and -5. 4 and -5 gives you -1 when you add it. So if we want +4, make that 4 positive. If we want -5, gotta make the 1 negative. Okay, so then we've got this parentheses times this parentheses equal to 0. So same concept as before. If you're multiplying 2 parentheses and you're getting 0, then either 5x plus 4 is 0, or that 1x minus 1 equals 0. One of those parentheses has to be 0. So subtract 4, trying to get x by itself. 5x equals -4. Divide 5 after that, we get x equals -4 over 5. On the right, add 1. I'm just going to show one example on solving quadratics by factoring. Basically the same process that we've gone through. They want you to solve it, so you're going to set it equal to 0. And by the way, if I haven't mentioned this in a previous module, just in case you're curious about the quadratic thing, you'll either be looking at quadratic equations or linear equations. Linear, you'll just have x variables, but the highest power of x is 1. That would be a linear equation. Here, the highest power of x is what? 2. So if the highest power of x is 2, that's when you're talking about quadratic. So either linear or quadratic. You don't necessarily need to remember that, but sometimes the vocabulary confuses people. But that's all we're talking about. So set equal to 0, which means this -6x needs to come over. Add 6x. Factor x squared plus 14x plus 45 equals 0. Factoring it, that's going to be our two parentheses, equal to 0. Keep bringing down the equals to 0 because you'll have a mix in this section. On some of them, there's no equals. So you just stop when you factor it. When you've got your two parentheses, you stop there. That's your answer. If you've got an equals, though, that means you can solve it. You can tell what x actually is. So keep bringing down the equals so you don't forget that you're solving for x. We know we've got x and x at the start. They're both positive over there, so we can put in the pluses. Looking for two things that multiply to be 45 and add to 14. 9 and 5, right. And if you weren't sure, you can just start with 1 and 45. 2 doesn't go in, 3 and 15. 4 doesn't go in, 5 and 9. 6 doesn't go into 45, 7 doesn't, 8 doesn't, and then you're back up to 9. What are the answers going to be on this one? Yep, -9 and -5. The opposite of this, the opposite of this. If you're unsure, you can always do the x plus 9 equals 0, the x plus 5 equals 0, and then work it out algebraically. But it's just going to be the opposite. Okay, so this one, not really complicated, but different enough that it might throw you. X squared minus 7 equals -3. This is the last example, by the way. X squared minus 7 equals -3, set equal to 0. So we want to bring everything over to the x squared side. So that -3 plus x squared minus 4 equals 0. There's a couple different ways that you could solve this. One of the ways is the difference of squares thing, but we haven't really talked about that as much. It's been a little while. It came up in a previous section, but here you might notice on a lot of these, you've got an x squared, you've got some kind of x term, and then you've got just a regular number, like a constant is what they're called. But just a number like 45, no variable attached to it, but x squared, x, and then a constant. So here I might recommend that you notice we're missing an x term maybe in the middle. You can go ahead and put in sort of an imaginary x term. We'll say x squared plus 0x minus 4. Maybe I'll do that in a different color. So x squared plus 0x minus 4, and then we're factoring it as if it's a trinomial. X and x at the front. Then we're looking for two things that multiply to be 4, add to 0. Yep. 1 and 4, you can't make 0 out of that, but 2 and -2 multiply to be -4, also add to be 0. So +2, -2. Then your answer is just going to be the opposite of this and the opposite of this. So the opposite of 2 is -2. The opposite of -2, +2. Okay. All right. So I'll post the PDF of these notes. If you didn't get a chance to write all those down, you can look at that. If you've got all those notes written down, you can scan it and submit it for the notes points.